Um, all right. And so we're hoping that this will be a really interactive breakout. So please feel free to pop in with thoughts that you have at any point in time. And it's possible that if you have a solution idea, we may come to it a little bit later, and we'll just let you know. So I think there's enough folks that we can have a really vibrant conversation. And this particular breakout is being live streamed. So once again, if folks are watching the live stream and want to join, just go to tinyurl.com/nenj-bay-mtg. And just a couple meeting guidelines. So feel free to come on video, engage actively with us. It is helpful if you raise a hand, use the raise hand function and let us know that when you would like to speak, just to keep us from talking over one another. And you can also continue to use the chat function. And it's best to, speak from your own experience. And if you find yourself speaking a lot, you can think of who hasn't spoken and help encourage those folks to speak. And if you find that you're not saying anything, please consider stepping forward and giving us your feedback, because we're really here to hear from you all today. So we're going to start out with sort of what is at risk in the neighborhood that we're talking about. And we'll talk about some potential actions that we're looking at, how the area might change as a result, some key considerations, pros and cons for the different types of solutions that we're looking at. And, what do you think? What do you want to make sure happens? What is the most important thing for us to advance based on what you've seen or anything you think is missing? And what do you want to make sure does not happen? So once again, this is Bergen Point, Constable Hook, and MOTBY. And I'm going to invite Sue to tell us a little bit about the area we'll be talking about.
Thank you so much. I think most people are aware of this area. It's an interesting break. It's an interesting break of how the area was picked, because it does cover our eastern section of the Hudson River projects, which basically are MOTBY, which I think we all are aware of. But also then South Cove Commons, which is a very important area for us, and a very important area for our birding community and our nature club area. That's very important to us. And then you get down to Bayonne Crossing. But this area is interesting because it really reflects the historical nature of Bayonne as being a center of industry. So as you come down along Route 440 below South Cove, you actually then get into the Constable Hook area, which really has always been, the highlight has been tank farms and oil production. And as I said earlier about Exxon and IMTT, that area being repurposed. But then as you go down and you actually go through a swath to go on the Kilvin Cull, you have even more projects down there coming off Old Hook Road. And you wrap around to one of the jewels, Dennis P. Collins Park, and then you get to the Texaco area, which I was discussing before, and then you move up to Best Foods, which has also been repurposed as for warehousing, which was the Best Foods development early in the day. One of the questions in the chat room was what is the TOGAS going to do for? What is TOGAS going to do for the people of Bayonne? And one of the things, if you get a chance to see the planning board hearing from last week, I'm sure it's still up on TV, they are required to come up with a solution for the flooding in the area. I think we all know that area, especially the people who are on here from the Bergen Point area, that we had very bad storms. And when we have bad storms, we have trouble along Avenue A, especially in the area between 2nd Street and Gertrude Street, and we need solutions. And so the planning board has required that they actually, before they get their CO, which will be in a couple of years, they actually have to work with the city to come up with solutions and pay their fair share of coming to a solution for that, which will be exciting to see. But also in terms of other things, they also agreed to have internship programs for our students and work with our schools and many other areas. But one of the more exciting things I think for us all is one of the good things that we do very well is we have developed our walkways, not only on the east side, but the west side. Well, we've developed them where we can, where they're not industrial. But on the Texaco property, there will be a very exciting walkway from where they are down to the tip of Bayonne, and that will complement. And the west side discussion Kevin's leading, that'll also complement the development of our walkways, which are going from the A&P right down to Texaco, the Texaco property. So we've always had wonderful parks and recreation areas, and this will be able to be completed because that's what we've heard. We've heard from the people of Bayonne that this is very important to them to have that open space and that recreation component. And as we know, people in Bayonne and in most communities in Hudson County really like to use their cars, and but they also like to walk on the walkways. So they may be able to get to the walkway, and then they can actually walk through there. So as I said before, that whole Constable Hook area has really been the industrial heart of Bayonne. And it will be nice to see new warehousing, clean warehousing, and sustainable areas in that to repurpose that area. And as we know our areas are vulnerable to flooding. I mean, the building department has standards now where you have to build above the flood zone, and you cannot have your parking in the flood zones. And all of these sites are being raised because that ultimately raising the site above the flood and then working on the scenarios that you're developing here for us. And John is working especially for that, we make sure that this new development not only contains the strategies that will resolve flooding that we have, but also be in the best interests of the city, because we've had these problems with flooding for years. And now, as John said, there's really planning going on and money being put towards it from the state, and really this coordinated approach, and actually the efforts of Resilience New Jersey, because they're actually, as you go through these materials and can look at these flood maps and these flood scenarios, it's very interesting. It's very high level work that has been provided to the towns that are involved in Resilience New Jersey that give us a much clearer understanding of what our problems are, but also starts to open us up for scenarios that will give us solutions. And as I said, we've discussed the access to the waterfront and parks, the desire to see more green space, trees, and green infrastructure, and pedestrian experience to give us access to our public transportation system, which has really been developed with the growth of the light rail. I think that would start me out.
Thank you, Sue.
Go forward.
Can we take a moment to switch translators?
Sure.
All set.
Okay, great. And so Russ is going to tell us a little bit about the map that you're looking at right now, which shows 3 different types of flooding.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Carly. And thanks, Sue, for that intro. And what Sue alluded to in terms of the modeling that we have access to and the mapping that was produced from that is what you're seeing here on the screen. It kind of combined from a variety of different flooding perspectives. As part of this project, we looked at both the storm surge flooding, which is related to the Hurricane Sandy, projected into the future to show what would it be in 2070, along with sea level rise of 2.4 feet associated with that. And then also you can kind of see in a lot of these areas as well, the stormwater flooding that's caused by also looking at this in the future, projected 24-hour 100-year storm, which includes sea level rise and 10% additional rainfall increase. And so from this, you can see a large portion of Bayonne inundated in both stormwater and coastal surge conditions. specifically on the east side of Bayonne, where you have a lot of low-lying areas, you have particular problems with both surge and stormwater, as I believe everyone has experienced here in the past. This is also complicated by future tidal conditions due to sea level rise, where groundwater and tidal conditions are already a problem within this area in terms of discharging water from the sewer system, and especially impacting low-lying tidal areas. That will only continue to be, only increase in terms of problems in the future if we factor in sea level rise. So there's quite a bit of vulnerable areas in here that really lead to some challenges in terms of how we address those. We'll step through those in the scenario development here shortly.
Russ.
Good.
And so Russ is going to talk through the scenarios and will hopefully also represent some of the projects that are already planned. And we have some really great expertise on the line. So please feel free to pop in and let us know if there's anything missing. But the way that we've structured this, there's so many different things that you can do. And also there's so many things that just because of the scale of and magnitude of flooding that is possible, you know, there's a lot of different types of things that are necessary. And so we've divided different types of options into these 3 different categories based on solution complexity and also who has the authority to implement now. It doesn't mean that they might necessarily be able to do it with their existing funding and resources. They may still need state and federal funding, but you know, who can accomplish this? So scenario 1 is things that entities could accomplish on their own. They could quarterback this by themselves. So that would be things that the city might be able to do on their own, what private individuals could do on their own, businesses, academia. Scenario 2, we'll talk through different options that can only be done if they're done in coordination with someone else. So what are things that the city and private sector would need to partner on together in order to advance them? That individuals would also need to be involved, or institutions. And scenario 3 is really the types of options that are on the table that would require regional coordination in order to advance them.
Yeah.
And feel free to pop in with questions that you might have. You know, we'll just, in the interest of time, we're sort of breezing through, but we are going to leave space for questions. But you know, if there's anything that's not clear, then feel free to cut us off, or if you have anything to add.
Yeah. So I'll talk through a lot of our structural or physical solutions that we're investigating to reduce flood risk throughout the area, and Carly will kind of help me guide through the non-physical solutions, the programmatic or policy elements that can be implemented for each of the different scenarios. We structured our scenarios largely because of some of the great examples that we've seen already in Bayonne, the wonderful work that Sue and others have been doing to leverage growth within the area to promote resiliency and resiliency measures. And so there will be many of those lessons learned that show up in these different scenarios. And that'll be kind of a way for us to talk about the differences. We wanted to start by first talking through scenario 1, which really involves that individual initiative. What can you do on your own to advance resiliency and reduce risk? Throughout the region, this is largely what communities are already doing, trying to take advantage of public space to implement resiliency projects. A great example is the Fitzpatrick Park project, where public park is being converted into stormwater management to alleviate the pressures on the combined sewer system. So we certainly have elements here in this scenario that align with those types of approaches. You'll notice here that that there is an increase in the drainage improvements where Bayonne can make those improvements largely on their own. Increase piping capacity is a good example. And taking that concept from Fitzpatrick Park and applying it to other areas, such as the Cottage Street Park project. Where it becomes particularly challenging with this scenario is providing more coastal protection measures. And you'll notice on this, as far as structural solutions to reduce risk for coastal storm surge, a lot of the suggested improvements focus on protecting individual sites and incorporating individual resiliency into these areas. As Sue mentioned, there's a lot of that ongoing already in redevelopment sites. But there would be a need to continue to retrofit other areas, especially key infrastructure areas, with those types of approaches. The next slide will show us what some of those approaches look like for this scenario. You can see here that from a coastal protection standpoint, that individual site protection is really integrated into the site itself, whether it's for raising the land or the structures themselves, or for providing individual site protection integrated into the site. So that's a key element of scenario one for coastal protection. What you'll see for drainage improvements and green infrastructure implementation, how we kind of have sorted out our structural physical actions, is that improved stormwater conveyance and additional storage, subsurface storage integrated into public spaces. There's an opportunity to go even further with green infrastructure to continue to incorporate that into public right-of-way and other areas where there is more public control. And so taking that concept of providing localized stormwater management and expanding that throughout the city. There are some particular challenges with this. Certainly taking an individual site protection framework here for coastal protection leaves large areas unprotected, and especially getting access to critical access to different types of facilities or emergency services is really challenging in those types of situations. Also, from a drainage perspective, trying to find ways to separate stormwater and redirect it, it can be a really good opportunity for improving the capacity of your existing combined sewer system. But you do need to invest fairly significant dollars before you can really realize a lot of those benefits. And similarly with green infrastructure, you can make that investment, but if you're focused on the public right-of-way, you have to compete with other needs for that space, and that space can be limited. Carly, do you want to talk about some of the non-structural measures?
Sure. So for scenario one, and as a reminder, these are sort of the individual initiative, and what we've got here on the screen is really focused on things that municipalities can do on their own. And it's really responding to a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from folks about what is needed from an outreach and education and capacity building perspective, policy and governance, and service and program development. And so you can also think of these non-physical solutions as sort of gap fillers. to address some of the things that the physical solutions are not quite getting to, but also things that will help improve resilience overall. So we've got policy measures here to protect areas that might be left outside of coastal alignments, where we're doing coastal alignment, potentially doing options for coastal alignment along right-of-ways, policy-based measures like trash cleanup and catch basin programs. We've gotten a lot of feedback about the catch basins being clogged and the need for support in that area. Things like a municipal stormwater utility to help fund and implement resilience related measures, and then green infrastructure programs on public open space in order to help meet the goals of scenario 1. So really focusing that on public open space, because that is something that the city has the authority to do on their own. The city-led flood management 101 campaign, that's something that, you know, we're sort of hypothesizing is really would be better at sort of the region or the region level, which would be scenario 3. And we'll talk about that more there. So we'd love to get your feedback on scenario 1. You know, what are some things that you really would like to see advance from scenario 1? You know, are there things that you would not want to see based on what you've seen so far? And then we also have some key questions for you to consider. And these are relevant questions across all 3 scenarios. And so you'll see these questions again and again because they help us to get kind of site specific. And Carl, it sounds like you have a question. And please feel free. Oh, you just went on mute. You can come off. And then, so you know, when you speak, just let us know sort of your name. Feel free to introduce yourselves, because I know that we didn't do introductions at the beginning of this breakout.
That's okay. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. I'm Carl Hetzel. I live on Cottage Street, and I'm a licensed engineer and a licensed planner for the state of New Jersey.
Great.
And the only question I have right now is on the plan shown for the Cottage Street holding tank under the park. It appears that you're only showing a pink line from Hobart to East 5th Street on Cottage Street. I would think that you would need to have intercepts at least a block away. So that would be further up Cottage towards Orient, along Hobart to Evergreen, and along Hobart to East 5th Street. Has anybody decided on the final thing for that?
Well, I can speak to that. And first, yeah, I think, first of all, I really appreciate your insight here. In fact, if you're looking at switching jobs, Carl, I would direct you to some Arcadis job postings if you're ever interested. But to begin with, I will say
Who's
that
talking? I don't see anybody.
Oh, this is Russ Dudley with Arcadis. I'm a water resources engineer. I've been working on Resilient New Jersey to help advance the individual scenarios and action plans. But I also had the opportunity to work with John and others on the Cottage Street project. It was advanced to a concept level design as part of FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant application process. So we did submit that project for grant funding. We're very hopeful that we can get FEMA funding for that project. We did not advance that through the full design phase for the grant application. It is a very high level concept right now. We started by looking at the surface topography of that project and what we feel is accumulating in that area from a stormwater perspective. As you mentioned, it's a low point within the area. We have not identified the full extent in terms of collecting and redirecting stormwater to that project, but it is primarily focused on reducing the localized flooding. We'll certainly take these notes into account. Hopefully, we're able to procure that additional grant funding, and at which point Bayonne would have the opportunity to move that into the design phase where those things would be examined more closely.
It looks like John, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just sorry, the gentleman that was asking the engineer. Yeah, we've done local modelling in the whole area of Cottage Street. The original idea was to put a large detention pond underneath the Cottage Street Park, but we decided, looking at some modelling, Tyler, was it? He's your I've forgotten Tyler's second. Was it Tyler Carson?
That's right.
Tyler, yes. Tyler, and we also ran another hydraulic model through one of our consultants, and they were pretty much broadly in agreement. And what we looked at was increasing the size of a sewer down Cottage Street. There's an existing 30-inch. What we're going to do is increase that to 48-inch. And what we also wanted to do was to improve the operation of 5th Street pumping station. Not there's anything wrong with it, but we could actually force, without doing very much, very small adjustments to the station, we could make it more effective as to relieve flooding in that area. The 5th Street pumping station, sorry, I've forgotten the engineer's name that lives on Cottage Street.
Carl.
Hello, Carl. Yeah, hello, Carl. Yeah, what we were looking at down there, you're living on Cottage Street, you're probably familiar with 5th Street pumping station. No, it's really just a lift station. It's what it is. What that lift station does is it relieves. It was designed in the 1960s actually as a flood relief system for Cottage Street, but it also takes significant flows from the Avenue E area, from about 10th Street up to about 22nd, 23rd Street on Avenue E. And what we're looking for, what we've been doing is right in the middle of doing it, in fact, is surveying the condition of the sewers from the Avenue E area and Cottage Street to see what improvements we could make. One of the improvements, apart from increasing the size of the 30-inch sewer down Cottage Street, is to actually, we want to increase that to 48-inch. But one of the things we're also looking at is to reline the sewers to get, the storm sewers to get better flow through into the 5th Street pumping station, smoother pipes, pass more water. The design of that's currently being worked on, the final design. But in essence, what I think we're going to see is the detention pond on the Cottage Street Park. And so we were originally looking at some enormous great thing, 12 or 18,000. It's probably going to be in the order of 6,000 to 8,000 cubic feet of storage. It'll only be at one end of the park.
Hey, Cottage Street? You said 5 feet deep and 5,000 square feet. So that gives you about 26,000 square feet, 26,000 cubic feet of water storage in that holding tank.
Sorry to interrupt.
Just a quick note. Yep. Go ahead.
I just need to
Megan.
switch our translators to give them a break. Thank you. Okay, we're all set. Thank you.
What the model shows, Carl, is that we need about 8,000 cubic feet of storage in total.
Yep. And just to this is really great conversation and the kind of depth that is really valuable, but just sort of in the interest of time, maybe Carl, you want to drop your email address into the chat and we can maybe connect on the details of the application. So
fine.
Thank you. Any other comments on scenario 1 before we move into scenario 2? And we'll also post all of this on the website. And actually, Megan, it could make sense to drop our, we have a little form that if you have specific feedback and you don't feel comfortable sharing in this forum, because I know it's live streamed, you can also provide it in the form.
I will say John provided a nice segue into talking about some of the key differences in scenario 2, primarily from a drainage perspective. And a big component of this is finding more opportunities to consolidate and optimize stormwater management throughout the area. And taking advantage of things like the Fifth Street pump station is a really good example of where we can redirect potentially more stormwater to some of these existing facilities, or in certain cases, optimize the siting of new facilities, whether it's retention tanks or pump stations or both, to get water out of the system and clear more capacity within the combined sewer system. So scenario 2, from a drainage perspective, it's intended to be opportunistic there to consolidate stormwater to manage more of the stormwater flooding. Another big component of scenario 2 relates to the coastal protection. Rather than individual site protections, we are now looking to incorporate coastal barriers into the plan to protect larger areas. We are still being opportunistic, primarily by looking at internal alignments, upland alignments that can take advantage of, again, public space through road raisings in the right-of-way, or potentially leverage existing land within parks or other ongoing redevelopment projects to hopefully provide more comprehensive protection. This still won't protect all areas. There would still be a need for individual site protections on the other side of the barrier, but certainly it provides a little bit more comprehensive protection on the other side. How this looks in terms of some example images, if we look at some of these pictures then, is that we'll see much larger types of projects. So I mentioned the inland road raising associated with this scenario, but there's also opportunities to leverage the walkways that Sue had mentioned before, to incorporate elevation and protection into those coastal walkways. The other nice consideration with scenario 2, especially as it relates to those additional partnerships, is in terms of the green infrastructure solutions. We can gain a lot of benefits, not just from stormwater management, but from other public benefits by incorporating more green infrastructure on private sites. That can improve environmental quality, reduce heat island effect. And so expanding the green infrastructure program to look more at privately owned sites, especially through some of these redevelopment initiatives, is an opportunity to expand the benefits there. As in the other scenario, there are some issues to consider here. Certainly incorporating barriers into coastal protection measures gives you the opportunity to protect larger areas, but it does require additional coordination. And that could slow the process down or potentially make it more expensive. Looking to consolidate that drainage infrastructure and optimize the management of stormwater does bring with it the opportunity to address more stormwater during these flooding events, but requires potentially additional investment without a lot of additional co-benefits associated with that. And green infrastructure is a great solution, and I think a way that we all want to see things moving forward. But that requires an additional number of assets that need to be maintained as part of a larger cohesive resiliency strategy.
Any comments or questions on the physical solutions before we talk about the non-physical?
Yes.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. I just wanted to understand the projection for drainage improvements. Is that suggesting that the water flow from the 34th Street light rail area would go southwards down Avenue E, with some of it draining into Constable Hook and some of it draining into the Kilvan Call?
Yeah, we're still exploring this, but the intention is to find opportunities to separate that stormwater and redirect it to separate outfalls where possible. On the north side, the intent is to be able to separate that and redirect it to the MOTBY inlet there. And on the south side, I think you mentioned that as well, is to try to separate that and outfall it separately so we can get it out of the combined sewer system. Does that address your question, Jeff?
Yes, it's very important since the 34th Street area, East 34th Street area was very hard hit on September 1st. We had about 3 feet of water just surging through the neighborhood. I had 7 feet of water in the basement. There was a lot of damage done in the area. It was really the East 34th Street area and the 34th Street light rail station area. It's at the bottom of the hill. So the water flows downwards from uphill, and there was really nothing blocking the flooding at all. So if there's a way of increasing the outflow of the water out into the Kilvan Call, or some other place instead of into residential neighborhoods, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. That's a really challenging area because of a number of infrastructure problems, right, in that area that relates to depressed underpasses and really kind of congregates stormwater flows in that area. And so addressing that is certainly a particular focus. That would be potentially needed to go deeper and look at incorporating subsurface storage below the surface, obviously, and then pumping that out to overcome the elevations at the outfall.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's great feedback. And from a non-physical solution perspective, you start to see how much more is possible when we partner with the private sector and community-based organizations. The advancements are deepened. So for example, one of the things that we have been hypothesizing, and also through our engagement processes we've been learning, is that perhaps if we worked directly with community-based organizations and advocates from deaf and non-English speaking communities, we might be able to increase participation in efforts like this. Also, in order to implement a flood overlay zone, that would require action on private properties. You have to get some level of support and engagement from the private sector, incentivizing green infrastructure on private properties. So that's expanding the number of places that we might be able to implement these projects, as Russ had mentioned before. And resilience hubs is something that we didn't talk too much about during the introductory presentation, but that has been a really big theme of the work that we've done so far. We've heard a lot of feedback from members of the public that it can be challenging to know where to go and what resources might be available to them when there is a disaster. And so this idea of resilience hubs is taking places that are community gathering points that members of the public might already go to, like schools or libraries, community centers, and having them do double duty when there is an emergency. We put together a funding application for a pilot at Eastside High School or Ann Street School in Newark to have a resilience hub at that school, which already serves as a food distribution center and was a COVID testing site, but retrofitting it to be a cooling center retrofitting it with power resilience and also doing a bunch of stormwater improvements so that it could be a safe place for people to gather. And so doing that in collaboration with ICC, we know that the programming there will be a lot richer and people will increase their awareness of it. So those are some of the key things that come out as we progress into scenario 2. So we've gotten a little bit of feedback so far, but what other feedback do you all have on what you saw of scenario 2? Things that you really want to see advance, and things that maybe concern you about what you saw. And then we'd love to get feedback on specific locations for where you might want to see greening projects, or if there are brownfield or contaminated sites that you would really love to see transformed. Where are those at? Or where might there be some candidate sites for resilience hubs?
I think it may have been indicated on some of the diagrams, but the underpasses around 21st Street, 22nd Street underneath the railroad, those have been terrible for flooding. So a focus on those areas would be very important.
Great feedback. And I saw Ahmed.
Yeah, I was gonna say in reference to it was kind of a question and a statement, but I know there's a couple areas by East 24th, like right where they just built that the storage spot, like the storage box thing, and I know they get really bad flooding, especially when we had heavy rain over there. You could see like nearby the storm sewers, like they were literally like bubbling up, and so that whole area had flooding. But I noticed that like there's a patch of open grass on the right side and on the back that's just vacant and it's not being used for anything. So like I was kind of wondering, how would that play into this factor, since of course that you could use that as a method of resiliency, but it's like, how would you just improve vacant land like that, and how would you practically, I guess, or let's say hypothetically I owned it, like how would I put myself in a position to kind of say, okay, well, my place gets flooding due to kind of a not so efficient sewer system that's right next to me, but I have this vacant land right here. What could I do to kind of make it better, or at least alleviate some of that flooding, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Russ, you want to or John, it looked like you wanted to respond.
No, I was just going to say something that Joe Ryan just mentioned about the underpasses on 22nd Street and 23rd Street. So we are looking at those, Joe. We've got a solution plan for 22nd Street. Again, it's the usual thing. When we get the money, we'll do it. But we're very well aware of the problems. But there's lots of little. I think there's the last time we looked in detail, there's somewhere around 27 or 28 really nuisance spots, as I like to call them, around town that hopefully will be addressed, and because of the long-term control plan, as much as anything, we improve. That'll alleviate some of these issues in time. Some of them are very local and require just very local solutions, like in Cottage Street we were talking about earlier. But anyway, I just wanted to say 22nd Street is definitely one that we've already got a plan to fix that problem. The 23rd Street, not so easy, but 22nd Street, absolutely.
Great. And so we're going to take a moment to switch translators, and then Russ, maybe you can respond to Ahmed's comment.
Okay, switching now. We should be good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. In response, I think that there are a lot of opportunities to expand the benefits of something like Fitzpatrick Park or Cottage Street Park to other areas of the city, leveraging vacant properties. And we've been working, I see Alan had to drop off, but we've been working with Alan Miller to understand the pipeline of, or understand the funding opportunities through the state to try to identify a pipeline of properties that can be converted, maybe from private vacant properties to be cleaned up and converted into stormwater management parks that could be a benefit to the public. And so I think we're seeing a lot of great lessons learned through the work that Bayonne has already been doing and advancing that we're trying to leverage for expanded opportunities throughout the city. And that's a way that we could consider those types of partnerships. We'll kind of then turn here towards scenario 3, which really involves that regional coordination. And this provides a lot of really great opportunities for more comprehensive and cohesive solutions. But as the name implies, it does require quite a bit of coordination. A key element of that is focused on expanding the coastal protection measures, in some cases along existing rail lines or rail right-of-ways, to bring that barrier closer to the coast. That will be connected through other barriers along the coastline, through expanded riverfront walkways, as we've mentioned before, and also interact with a lot more of the private redevelopment properties and projects along the coastline to create that comprehensive protection. That's a key element from a coastal perspective. There's also a lot of additional improvements from the drainage and green infrastructure perspective. You might kind of notice here, it's kind of identified there at number 3 on this map, that we're looking for ways to separate and redirect stormwater to deep tunnels, specifically around 34th Street, where we do have those particular flooding problems. Redirect that into deep tunnel that can be used for storage and can be managed more effectively at the end of that tunnel through a pump station. And so that's kind of the extreme example of consolidating stormwater by integrating in deep tunnel storage. From a green infrastructure perspective, the opportunity then potentially lies with, especially at that separated stormwater, incorporating more coastal green infrastructure into the solution. Perhaps putting in coastal wetland areas where stormwater can be managed from a quantity and quality perspective as it's collected and discharged there along the coastline. And so incorporating additional green infrastructure through living shorelines and wetlands is an opportunity to expand the public space available. A few images quickly of what this looks like. You can see a lot larger projects on these images and more linear projects as well. So integrated projects between coastal protection as well as drainage improvements, and a lot of large infrastructure such as deep tunnel conveyance and storage. Certainly some trade-offs here as well, just like the others. You can provide a lot more protection through these measures, but especially in Bayonne, it's going to require a significant amount of coordination from a coastal protection perspective. And that's going to be very challenging and potentially be costly and require quite a long time frame to implement. Also costly to implement deep tunnel storage of stormwater. So while you will have the opportunity to capture and store and manage large volumes of stormwater to protect you against those larger, more intense storm events, there's a lot of constructability and cost challenges associated with that type of approach. And incorporating green infrastructure within these corridors and along the coastline gives us the opportunity to incorporate additional ecosystem benefits into the project, but has to be kind of considered with some of the other uses for this area, and reimagining of how the public accesses the water and some of these maybe more sensitive sites.
So before we move into the non-physical, any questions or comments about the physical solutions that Russ raised? And we can come back to this too. So from a non-physical perspective, you know, we really start to see sort of transformative possibilities, coordinating at the regional level. Something that has come up a lot in conversations with state agencies actually is the potential use of the Resilient New Jersey platform long-term, you know, sort of expanding and refining how this program develops over time. So, for example, you know, one of the things that makes the Resilient New Jersey program unique is that it is not only facilitating coordination across a broader geographic area, but on this call, you have state agencies, you have municipal agencies, you have community members, you have community-based organizations, sometimes we have federal agencies. And so what we're able to do is facilitate coordination, both on sort of a geographic area, but then in multi-levels of governance and at multiple scales, you know, neighborhood, municipal, regional, and then much broader relevance. And so leveraging the Resilient New Jersey program as a platform for engagement to provide engagement around resilience-related issues that are relevant to the region. We've heard a lot of feedback about the need for a single source of truth. People have complained to us about this idea of having portal proliferation syndrome, where they are, you know, hearing sort of slightly different things from many different entities, and it makes it very difficult for them to understand who's really the authority on any topic. You know, how can they trust what they're hearing? And so providing sort of a brand, so to speak, and coordinating mechanism to provide resources and messaging that people can really understand. Having a regional network of resilience hubs so that different entities can support one another across the region. Some areas may be hit at different times than others, and having a network that is both of CBOs and then also municipal agencies so that people can coordinate resources in that way. Ensuring that the long-term control plans incorporate climate change considerations. We know that the long-term control plans address water quality. There is some flood risk reduction benefit that comes from them, but perhaps, you know, we could do more with that. And also this idea of developing a pipeline of sites for stormwater management and for a resilient transformation process. And by that, I mean kind of converting contaminated sites in brownfields to areas like we see with Fitzpatrick Park, for example, turning that into something really incredible. So that is our last scenario, you know, and I know we're a little bit over time, but any feedback that you have on this, and we'd also love to hear, you know, of everything that we've discussed this afternoon, you know, what are some of the most important things for us to advance? And what do you want to make sure does not happen? I got a comment, avoiding consider the inconvenience to the public of all of this work. We don't want our lifestyles inconvenienced. So I think what that is referring to, that comment, is disruption from construction. And actually, that's something that has also come up a lot and could be the benefit of one of the things that we talk about in the scenario 3, which is this idea of having an infrastructure coordination council, so that you can dig once and hopefully, accomplish multiple things when you do that and not have to do it over and over again. Oh, Carl, I see you came off mute.
Yes, I did. You're right. It's going to be terribly inconvenient. And Bayonne Pit citizens, I've lived here all but 2 years of my life, will not go along with it. Aside from that, I think that we should find a way to convince them that it's actually in their benefit. They complain about flooding, or actually it's a sewer backup, and they don't want any inconvenience to ameliorate that that flooding. So they got to choose sooner or later. I don't see how that's going to happen.
So I think what I'm hearing there is in the final plan, we need to make the benefits really clear, and quantify that wherever possible. And that's actually something we will talk about at our next meeting, as sort of the cost of this risk if it goes unaddressed.
The taxes are exorbitant according to most people in Bayonne, and they probably are. But what you're saying is, I'm more concerned about them being annoyed that, oh, my street, like Cottage Street, if you dig it up, there's going to be no place to park, and people are like, they have 2 and 3 cars per household, and it's 2-family houses. So you've got 6 cars trying to fit in a space that isn't there. And they are not going to take it lightly. I park in the driveway, I don't care. But then I will not be able to get in and out of my driveway when you have the street torn up.
So minimize disruption.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Something else. You're saying about coordinating the construction so that everything gets done at one time. New York City, where I have some sewer experience, requires a 5-year no touch after they come through. So we might have to go with something like that. Joe, if you hear me, think about that.
I see Joe, he's listening.
I'm listening. Yeah. Well, the city always runs into the problem that after we pave a street, sometimes utility companies then come along right after and chop up the street again. It's always a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why New York City went to the 5 years no touch.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where that feedback about having an infrastructure coordination council came from, right? So all the entities that have their fingers in the infrastructure pie, so to speak, within the region need to be getting together and sharing their capital improvements plan, and they also need to be integrating resilience related considerations into those and leveraging, construction schedules together wherever possible. I know that's probably quite ambitious, but you have to start, somewhere, and talking is somewhere. Yeah. You can also get economies of scale if you're already mobilized in an area, it's already torn up.
Yes,
yeah. On the subject of ambitious, something that I didn't see today, there has been some discussion about constructing very large gates that could be put up in the event of a storm surge, such as the idea, maybe it's a fantasy, but it's an interesting one, of having a giant water gate that could be put into place in the Narrows area between Brooklyn and Staten Island, so that if there were a surge into the harbor, you might be able to have some kind of giant gate that could close. That, it seems to me, would be some kind of regional possibility. You're talking about regional coordination. Having a series of them, if that's even possible, would certainly require regional coordination, and I'm sure the involvement of the Army Corps of Engineers, the Port Authority, and various other very large entities.
That's been looked at, you know, Joe. I think Arcadis, yourselves, Carl, you have an interesting few slides online that discusses a surge barrier across the Verrazano Straits, Verrazano Narrows, beg your pardon. I think it's a very, very good idea. They did, you know, I'm from England originally. We did it all down the east coast of England. We had the London surge barrier, the one in Hull, one in Newcastle, basically to protect flooding. I think the idea of a barrier across the Verrazano Straits makes enormous sense. Might have to include one or maybe two ship locks. That's the only problem. Be like us, because you've got to get the ships through it somehow. But not impossible. It's not like it's that outrageous when you think of the costs of, you know, the cost of doing all these resiliency projects. You know, one big project might be the perfect answer. You can go online. It's been discussed all over the place. The Verrazano Narrows. While listening, Joe, it's just the reason why the flooding problem and underneath the railroads at 23rd Street is difficult is because wrong streets. I meant the 21st Street, of course. 21st Street, East 21st Street, and East 22nd Street. They're the ones we looked at. Beg your pardon. I know. I think I said East 23rd Street, didn't I, earlier? Stupid of me. There we are.
Oh,
But anyway, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, we need to switch translators just really quickly.
done.
And then I wanted to speak to the
Switch.
gate a little bit. We did talk about that during community meeting number 4. I think probably because we went down to the municipal level, we didn't include that. But one thing to consider when it comes to the big gates is, and I was part of an assessment of the Boston Harbor Barrier. We did a feasibility study for the Boston Harbor Barrier a few years ago, and I helped run the quantitative assessment to look at the benefits and costs of that. And with sea level rise, these considerations become a lot more complex, you know, and it's sort of ends up becoming an and, not an or question, because you know, these gates are designed to only close every so often. But as sea levels rise, they have to close more and more often to mitigate flood risk. And then you get to the point that they're basically clapping. And so they can only really mitigate against like really infrequent storms. And so you end up needing some level of shoreline protection, district level protection, even if you have a barrier.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Also,
No, I was just going to say that's for sure. I mean, it's you know, you can put the barrier in to start with, and then you end up, you know, in certain circumstances, you're flooding the Far Rockaways or you know, a lot of Brooklyn. That's true. I think it's very interesting I haven't seen that in detail. I'd love to know a bit more about it, but it seems to me like at least on the face they look like a great idea, but I can see why it could get difficult very quickly.
Well, and it's an and, you know, and so what
Yeah.
we ultimately, you know, the conclusion from the Boston Harbor Barrier study was sort of a punt, sort of, you know, we need to, let's reassess this in another 5 years. What we do know is we have to do some level of district level solution.
Carly,
But I can send you that study if you're interested too.
Carly, the Fukushima plant over in Japan had a 14-foot high seawall and the 21-foot tidal wave hit it. So how high should we build the seawall? Rhetorical question.
Yeah, you can never eliminate risk.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Do we have more to go through?
No, we don't. You know, this is kind of, you know,
I think we're doing this.
yeah, we're having this conversation now. And
Joe?
we are going to have this conversation again at 6:30 too. So if folks kind of want more time to think and share even more at 6:30, we'll be here. And we are going to post these slide decks online. We're converting them into what we call a meeting in a box so that we hope that you'll keep engaging around these concepts and send us even more feedback. So we've got the form, because we know that in some cases this might be the first time that folks are seeing this, even though we did go through it at a higher level with community meeting 4. Now we're diving in more deeply.
Carly, did you say you had that study for the barrier on Verrazano Narrows?
No, I have the Boston Harbor Barrier study
Oh, the Boston
that
Harbor,
I can
okay.
share. Yeah.
I read little bits about the Verrazano Narrows.
Joe,
It'd be interesting to look at that.
Joe and John, you also need to put a flood barrier of some sorts, the sliding gates or whatever you have at the north shore of Staten Island across the Arthur Kill.
Yes.
Okay. If you only block one side, water will go around it. I'm sorry for waving my hands and not explaining whole enough.
So cunning, isn't it?
All right.
So you're right. It's interesting. It would be a massive project, but very interesting. But you know, flood barriers have around the world have done quite well. I mean, they built that one in Venice. It seems to work quite well. The one in Thames Barrier in London, one in Hull. You know, it seems to work quite well. But it'd be a massive project for you know, the Newark Bay.
And then how far along the North Shore of Staten Island do you put this? Because if you just block, well, the Narrows are easy because you have cliffs on two sides. Arthur Kill is not that way, so you're going to have to build along the North Shore for a distance in order to actually stop the inflow.
Mary Kimball, who is our planning and policy lead on our team, just reminded me that we can share the latest information on the different barrier options that the Army Corps has been studying. We've been looking into that as part of this program.
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Here, she just dropped it into the chat. Thanks, Mary.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for your time. Sue, I don't know, did you want to close us out?
I just want to thank everybody for coming. Obviously, this is a very complicated issue, and we're going to have lots of meetings and continue because it's in all our interests to do whatever we can to promote Bayonne. And I did want to thank Tommy Cotter, who came into the meeting while we said nice things about you earlier, Tom.
Thank you, Sue. Sorry I was late, but emergency came up and
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Did you have any questions about the Fitzpatrick Park, or was that discussed while I was away?
Well, Alan pitch hit it and answered everything and said he did not do it as well as you would have. So
I'm sure he did a better job. I'm sure of that.
he tried.
He's very good at what he does.
Excuse me. How long did the actual construction of Fitzpatrick Park take? From, let's say, let's not count the groundbreaking with the pictures, but the actual start of construction, is it operational now?
Yes, it's operational now. We had some delays because of what we found under the ground. The old city hall was still there, the jail cells,
Police station.
foundations,
Yeah.
trolley tracks in the middle of Avenue C when we were separating the sewers just to become storm drain sewers. So there were some complications that we came up, but the contractor was able to work around it. And, you know, I think we got it done in a fairly reasonable amount of time, considering all the obstacles that were thrown at us. Because once you go into the ground, you never know what you're going to find.
You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that was the old police station and fire station.
yep.
Yeah.
So and it works. We've had
Sure.
actually when before the park was complete and the sewers were connected, they were collecting the water. And we noticed a lot of the residents in the area noticed that they didn't get the flooding that they normally got. And they were very happy about that because they were all expecting, you know, they were out there with their sump pumps and their shop vacs, and they were surprised that they didn't get water. So, you know, and that 300,000 gallons that we saved from going into the system up here, you know, at the end of the day, it works its way down to Cottage Street and Oak Street. So by keeping that flooding that water out from uptown, it also keeps it from going downtown. So it's a good idea, and I think that we should do a few more of them around town. There are, you know, like I said, Cottage Street, possibly First Street might be another area where we can use another retention system. We have a couple sites there that we may be able to look at without major disruption to, you know, the residents in the area. So that's something I think we should continue on. That's it.
Carly, I'll turn it back over to you to close.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for your active participation today. And any other feedback that you have, we would love to have it as we advance these scenarios toward an action plan. And we'll have, if you hadn't had enough, we're going to have another meeting that'll be the same structure at 6:30 and the same 2 breakouts. And thank you so much. Megan dropped into the chat a survey if you'd like to complete it about how you felt this meeting went. And then if you have other feedback you want to share about the options we talked about, there's a form in there as well. So thank you all so much. And thank you, Bayonne, Sue, Ahmed, John, everyone for participating.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.